Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Voices of Mishago. And I am sitting here with a fun Rick and Georgie Dieschbourg. And we were just looking at some photos, as a matter of fact, and maybe we'll comment about that a little bit as we move through their history a bit. But I guess let's just start with that. You were just showing me the photo here of the original cottage. And what year was that again?
1969 that we bought it with Rick's folks, and Rick helped build it. What year did you say?
In summer of '63. I was going into my senior year of high school.
So
that was the first. That was the first. We stayed up at the big house, at the estate house, and then we.
And that's
Tom and the boys, the two older boys, were helping.
And Uncle Ray and Uncle Bus. Right?
Uncle Ray and Uncle Bus came up. His two other brothers.
Uncle Tom's.
Okay,
his
sure.
Dad's brothers.
So let's go even preceding that, because when I think of the Dieschbourgs, one of the iconic family names of Mishago, how did the Dieschbourgs find out about Mishago in the first place? Is there a story to that?
Oh, for sure.
I think there might be.
Yeah, there is. And I said to Rick, I said, probably don't tell that story because I'm sure Eric has heard that story.
Well, I don't know that I have heard the story. Or
Well, the three buddies, my Uncle Tom, the Dieschbourg, and Joe Chappett, and Bill Nichols, okay, they all went to school together and stuff and knew one another. They were friends. But the girls, okay, their wives had all come up here, okay, as young ladies,
right.
In their high school years and stuff like that.
They had come up here when it was like a Mishago property?
That was when it was owned by the Furmans.
Okay.
So they owned the estate house, and the girls would come up, I guess, a couple, 3 times, you know what I mean, during the summer, and enjoy Pat Chap.
Well, it wasn't Chappett then.
Okay.
And Marie Nichols.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. And they would come up here and enjoy the properties and stuff like that, the beach, and spend some time up here during the summertime.
Okay.
So they girls knew about the property, and they kind of introduced, I think, the guys. I think that's how it went.
Well, I would tell you that would be consistent. I don't know if it's a direct tie-in, but it would be an interesting theme that I also heard John Muckna say, that he also credits his late wife with his origin story, because as he said, why would I want to spend $5,000 on a pile of sand? Okay, it was John Muckna's, and but she just wanted to be up here so bad. And then, if I recall the story correctly, he said that, I said, well, what flipped you? He said, well, Nichols said that, well, it's $5,000 now, but in another month or sometime it's going to be $5,500.
Yeah.
And John said, well, I'm not going to pay $500 more, so I'll that. And he never regrets that decision. Of course, it was a wonderful choice. So once again, the ladies.
Yes.
Who so often lead us men to fun and proper decisions, were influential in your guys' origin story.
Right. Well, it's the same thing, because my dad being Tom's brother and stuff like that, we came up, you know what I mean, and stayed at the big house and stuff. They were still subdividing. They were still had the surveyors out, and there was properties to take a look at, but it was too early as far as my brother and I were still in high school and stuff like that. So it would, but I mean, that was, that was when they first, had bought the property and stuff, the estate.
Still,
and
they
were
60s.
Still trying to figure out, I think, how to, subdivide it, what was going to work, and what lots could be built on, so on and so forth. You know what I mean, and what they were going to do in the back, and so on and so on. So, those are the early stages and stuff like that. But and then, like I say, they, got everything scored away and stuff, and, they worked out some kind of a deal with Lindahl Builders and stuff like that, and they bought a couple of their plans, and they started going to it. Tom was the one that that built most of them,
sure.
the cabins and stuff
Is
his boys and stuff like that as they moved through, you know. And I mean, John and his brothers and sisters could tell you more about, you know, how
John Chaput.
How Joe Chaput played into it, because I know he bought one of the, I think he bought the lumber mill down, or the lumber yard down the road and stuff, so that they could bring in carloads of cedar.
If I recall, again, I have done an interview with John and Diane, and I need to get back and do that again because I lost the file. But if memory serves me right, I seem to recall him saying that yes, that originally it was started with the Lindell plans, which was the plans and all that.
They kind of just
they said, hey, I can get this lumber by the trainload or something, and they would bring it up. Yeah.
And so, but they needed a siding.
Yeah.
They needed a place to unload, and they'd have the car sit there for a few days, or weeks or whatever, in order to unload and stuff like that. So they were able to then purchase, materials, a lot cheaper. They modified some of the plans and stuff like that as they went on, with the building and stuff like that. As people came up and decided, oh yeah, we would really like this, but instead of having just 2-bed or a loft, we'd like to have 3 bedrooms and a loft, or we'd have this and this and this.
Oh, interesting.
And so
it was
that's
the
how
input that would modify.
That's how they started to modify the plans and stuff like that. And
they have the loft. We didn't have a loft. We had just 3 bedrooms. This was just
a
little tiny
this picture here.
Yes, right.
And for those that are listening and not seeing this picture, I don't know, maybe I'll get it up onto some other site, but this is actually a relatively low slope to this design. For those that are listening, so many of the designs, in fact, Emily and I's design is a rather steep pitch roof.
Right.
And this original design, this photo from 1963 of the original.
So that's probably 60, I would say late 68 or 69 before we bought it, because you can see the grasses are grown up and stuff like that.
You can see that.
Yeah. So again, kind of a mild slope to the roof, just a beautiful design and cottage. And for those, I think most folks are familiar with you, but those that aren't, home first, like so many, is the Chicago area, right?
Oh,
yep.
Chicago,
yeah. Yep. So
Chicago.
What's that?
Mishago,
yes.
Right.
I kidded earlier talking with
somebody. A lot of
somebody.
people from Oak Park and River Forest, too.
Right. I said I think the only Mish part of Mishago was the land at that time, because I don't know that there was any. I mean, now I'm from Michigan. Emily and I are from the East Lansing area. Sure. There's others, but at that time it was all Chicago, I would say. There was the Mishago. There was a land of Michigan, but there wasn't any Michiganders that were here.
Well, it was by word of mouth and friendships.
Yes.
But all the 3 owners.
Bob Perotti worked for Tom Dieschbourg.
Right.
So and when they got this, when they decided to purchase this, he said, you have to come up. You have to see. I said, you might want to buy a piece of property and think about building something.
So this is
all. So these are that's how. But that's
and
Bill Nichols had the same situation with a number of the other people. I mean they were from Oak Park. The Dwyers knew. And so that was how it started to spread. The word, it really wasn't advertised. It wasn't put in the papers or anything like that. That there was land available right on Lake Michigan. You know what I mean? So that was an enticement. You know what I mean?
4 hours
for a lot of us.
What was the drive like then? Was it much different than now?
Yeah, because you couldn't know what the expressways were all the way through.
Okay.
You'd have to go up through Illinois. You'd come around the bottom. You get on the Indiana Tollway, and then you get off at LaPorte, and then you have to take it from LaPorte. You'd have to get up because that piece of 8094 wasn't completed. They didn't tie that together yet. So you'd have to get off in the 2-liner. I think it was 49. I think that
and
was
a few times.
And then
lost.
you jump off again.
And
then you get up on the expressway. Yes. You get on the expressway, and then up here the road stopped right after Fruitvale. Fruitvale was the last exit.
Oh.
Before actually, I don't know if they had ramps at Fruitvale yet, but right after Fruitvale Road, okay, you swung off, and you can still see it as you go in Old 31. You get off right past by Jay's, and you get in there, and you'll see there's an opening. You go, oh, it's really, there's no trees, it's just, like meadow, but you see there's a road. There's most of the landscapers and stuff, they have properties back there, and that's where they keep their,
Okay.
But that was the ramp. That was as far as you could go.
So,
Boom. So now you had to get off and get on Old 31.
And it was strictly summertime cottage for that reason and more. I mean, the travel here would be really atrocious in the winters and.
Well, not only that, but there was. I mean, it's not that you couldn't come up here, but none of them had heat.
Right.
I mean, so to speak.
Oh my God,
I mean, these
so
cottages weren't built. They were, tongue and groove. 2-inch.
That's how ours still is.
I know. And you can still cracks through the woods and stuff. And you say, oh, that's going to be going to be a little drafty, more than curtains can handle.
Oh yeah.
So
a little bit much in January.
Oh yes. Once I came up with Rick.
That was it.
We'd come up with the cousins and stuff, go snowmobiling and stuff. And they're roughing it. Because we put a Franklin stove in that little cabin and stuff like that. And that's all it was.
Right.
I mean, but there was the one time we came up here, it was after a pretty good snow. And the front door facing west, we got in the side over here. When we came in, there was snow, 8 feet into the.
Thankfully, that wasn't when I
room,
was with them.
Because it all blew in through underneath the door and stuff like that.
And
nothing was
We had
rubbish.
electric blankets on the beds, and swear to God, that was the warmest place. You would walk out of the bedroom, and it was freezing. And
Well, you had to keep the stove stoked.
Yeah, he would get up and stoke the stove.
So this was. This was early on. We had looked at a fun photo of the two of you, just youngsters, sitting on the beach there.
In high school, right?
In high school. So
we were still dating.
Still dating. So this comes through family here as kind of a family experience. So tell me about your guys's. Then you guys move on to get married, and
we got married in '68.
And
in January of '69. Georgie was pregnant with Lisa, our firstborn, and we got together with Uncle Tom and Colette and my mom and dad, and we purchased this little, And Tom said, we got, you could be up at the end. He says, there's nothing left on the beach. All the beach property is
I was
bought.
a little disappointed, but I'm thankful that we have this one.
Yeah, I kind of like being up on the bluff. I mean, the beach properties are, it's to each their own. They all have a different advantages.
There's no question. I mean, it was
so
like...
we buy this, and I call my dad and tell him, guess what? Rick and I bought a cottage in Michigan with his folks. I'm pregnant. I'm due in the beginning of the summer, and we're in a 1-bedroom apartment in Park Ridge. And God bless my father. He said, "Oh, good for you." Never. He probably had to bite his whole tongue off not to say a thing, but it all turned out wonderful.
So yes, let's just connect the dots here. You don't yet own a primary home.
No.
Right? You're renting an apartment,
correct.
A 1-bedroom apartment.
Correct.
You're pregnant.
Correct.
And you're purchasing a second home property, a rental, a summer house. Oh yeah, that was a fun phone call.
It was. Although, like I said, Dad didn't say anything, and
He came up.
Oh yeah, he came up one time and he did like it.
Sure.
But had we waited even a couple of years, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
So thank God Uncle Tom offered.
But it was, it was like I say, it was in the cards. The opportunity knocked, and like the same kind of story that John Muckner would have had.
Yes.
You want to wait? It'll probably cost you,
Yeah.
And it could cost you a hell of a lot more than that.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh well, you know what I mean. But then Tom was telling us and explaining to us this piece of property at the north end here, okay, being that this was the first cabin that was built, and then the one next door for the Schuschlers eventually bought. What they had done when they laid this out, when they surveyed it and they laid this out, and then when Tom started building, they were looking at trying to get the best view.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned before, yes, the trees were a lot smaller.
Yeah.
They were a lot less full. Okay, so you had a pretty good view of Lake Michigan.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So they set the houses toward the west-northwest.
You know, okay. I noticed that.
And everything, if you go down on the beach,
yeah.
you walk that almost every day, you go down to the beach, and as you come through, you can see everything it's not 90 to the water. It's directed more like toward Green Bay.
Yeah.
Because those are the best views, the sun.
Yep.
And I won't say that's true west. Just like this isn't true north. North is really that way.
Right.
So it would make sense if true north is, a little bit, not off the property, but it's this way. It's going what I would consider east.
That's right.
So this is the way that north and south is.
That's correct.
So there you're going. So you're directly.
Yeah, because this shoreline here, if you look at the mitten of Michigan, this shoreline is actually kind of arcing out, and it goes to Little Sable Point.
Right, and then it comes back
a bit of a northwesterly kind of a slant. This isn't a true north-south.
So as they placed the lots and they started building, they built the Juno, which was the one.
We bought.
That's the style. That's
the name of it. That was the name.
The Juno.
Yes. And wasn't it the Banff, or what was it next door?
The Oslo.
The Oslo.
Oh yes.
Okay. And when they built that, they crept this one over to the south lot line of lot 1. They skipped a lot, and they built the Oslo, and they pulled that more to the north of their lot line. For the angle and a better view.
Right.
Okay. So when they got them built and they started to realize, I think we goofed.
Oh.
Because all of a sudden, lot 2 has this. It cuts in a little bit.
Okay.
But doesn't just follow straight through down the line.
Okay.
Okay. It cut in a little bit. Plus. Because they did not infringe on lot lines, but they pulled this one
towards the
lot 1,
south.
the Juno, and they built it closer to the south lot line. So and the Oslo was built a little closer to the north lot line. So the second lot kind of got squeezed.
I was going to say a little squeeze on that.
And plus the fact that it had an indent on the bluff. So it didn't follow, it didn't have as much property in front of it.
Yeah, right.
Well, now if they wanted to build on the second lot, they would, number one, they would have had to pull
back towards sunset
because of the offset that they had to maintain. Off the bluff.
Yep.
They would have had to maintain that and pull that back, which would have said, now it was like lot 2 would have been like. You built your house, but it looks like you're in a closet because you got the sides of both the north house and the south house next to you that you're looking at part of their sides.
And the house would have to be set back to the east.
It would have to have been set back farther.
Yeah.
So they would have been looking.
Yeah, kind of into
the peripheral vision would have been toward.
Well, that's really interesting too that you mentioned about that the purposeful setting of the home to look into basically the setting sun is the way we can describe it, because I have noticed that, and I guess I realized what was going on, but it wasn't until you stated it just now that it was very clear, because I can be way out there, whether I'm fishing or anybody that's out in the water, if I'm fishing or if I'm kiteboarding, and you turn around, you look back towards this beautiful shoreline. And one of the unique things, I'll tell you just as a bit of a tangent while I'm on this subject of being out there, I mean, all due respect to this entire west side Michigan shoreline, but we've got the jewel here, because this is the clay banks.
Sure.
And I tell you, when you go just a bit to the south, that really starts to flatten out over there.
Mm-hmm.
And you go right here, and you've got those beautiful high banks that you guys are sit right on. And when I look back at that shoreline from, let's say, a quarter mile out, you see that these cottages and homes are like birds on a wire. You know, they're just all facing, but not straight out towards the water. They're angled slightly towards that setting sun. Yeah. And so, and for those that don't know your location, let me just kind of describe it. You're just saying lot 1. So for those that are familiar with the road systems, you're on the very north end of Sunset, and when you come in the entrance to Mishago, you have a choice of either forking left and kind of going through the gateway there, or continuing to the west and heading towards the water.
On Sunset. Right.
On Sunset, yeah. And you guys
where makes the turn.
Yes, right at that turn. Yes.
That's, But see, the other thing was, so they decided, the fellows, the builders, okay, we did goof. So what we'll do is we'll take and we'll re-subdivide, and we'll say we're going to split lot 2.
Oh.
And lot 1 will have a lot and a half, and lot 2 will have a lot and a half.
Okay.
And for a long time, that's the way it was. It was a lot and a half. So we had a lot and a half, and Schussler's had a lot and a half. And the way we were, at that time, this is when the builders still, so our assessments were considered a half a lot undeveloped, and so that's how that. And eventually they re-subdivided and redid it. So
then it's just
lot 1 is
just a larger lot.
It's a larger lot, as is lot 3. Okay, because it incorporated half of lot 2.
Well, that was a good solution to a kind of a goofy.
But the other side of it was that we were told, and I believe Tom thought for a long, long time, as the other 2 partners, that we had an easement. Okay, that we couldn't build on it. We could use it as our driveway, but we couldn't build on it. Okay, we could, but that's where Sunset Drive comes down off of, where it breaks away from Webster Road and Mishago Drive, and comes down. There is there's a part of that that's considered an easement. All right, and that from the state of Michigan. Okay, so we were always figured, okay, well, that's great. We have a place. I mean, we can drive up right next to a house and stuff like that, which is great. We can't build on it, but and this was, for a long, long time. And then, of course, our neighbor to the north had his 3 lots, okay, and he used to come down, okay, off of Webster Road, because he didn't have a driveway off of Webster Road or off of Scenic Drive. So he would come down and go down part of the way down Sunset Drive, and then he'd cut off and go into his property.
Via the easement?
If there was no, on the easement, he would be coming down. If he came off of Webster Road, he'd come down just like we do off onto Sunset Drive. But then before where the green gate was, where they'd just taken out, before that, he would cut over onto his property, cut across this first lot, because his home was built where Joe Hummel's house is now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And that was his, and that was going on for a long time, till they finally came to a agreement to disagree that this ain't going to work any longer. You got to get your own driveway. You're not going to continue coming in our driveway. You don't pay any assessments to us. We maintain that property. This is still back, I believe it was right shortly after or shortly before when the builders turned it over to the association. Okay. And then it had to be done legally and so on. And at that point, we still thought that the assessment or the easement still went out to the bluff. John Muckna came up and said, "Where did you get the idea that there's that is an easement all the way to the bluff?" He says, "This belonged to the state of Michigan." He says, "They granted it." And we did again through the association. We went to the legal, and we're not deeded that property, but we, after 50 years of maintaining Sunset Drive and using it, they gave it rights to us.
Sure.
There is no more easement.
Right. Okay.
Considered, because they would have had to come drive here and make a 90-degree turn and go through all of these properties if they ever decided to make Webster Road in a 90-degree turn,
right,
going north on Scenic Drive.
Yeah.
So that was never going to happen. But John Muckna told me, okay, when we were considering putting an addition on the house, okay, well, where and what can we do? And when I was talking to John, he was the one who pulled out his records because he was on the commission, but he never brought it up, and nobody never ever asked.
Yeah,
it wasn't pertinent to anything. And he said, Rick, he says the easement stopped where Sunset Drive turns south. So down at the Pine Tree, all right, which are lot markers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to jump over theirs when we were
Not
kids.
Me, him.
When those
my cousins and I and the we used to don't break those little pine trees down.
Yeah.
Because they bought a whole bunch of them, saplings.
Yeah.
And we would jump over them, screw around and stuff like that, playing capture the flag and all like that kind of crap, And so the easement stopped where Sunset Drive turns south, right, which is the Pine Tree.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the lot marker.
Back, it's amazing actually that all the lot lines and the development turned out as good as it has, because you think back in those times with things being maybe looser and maybe not the sophistication. I'm surprised there's not those things going on in every lot around here. And we had a little bit on ours just to kind of, just support what you're saying. And that is when we had our shed, we wanted to put on the shed, and I was aware of, the offsets and so forth like that. And, pulled out all the records that we have with the purchase of the cottage. Okay, here's your lot line, here's the orientation of the cottage on here, and it was all mapped out. And I asked the contractor, I said, 10 feet goes to here, but look, we've got more room than that, not a lot more room, but don't push the edge of that 10 feet. If you can get 11, 12, 13, that's fine. There's no reason to do that. It's plenty of, and so he did that. And then unbeknownst to us, and, the late Mr. Fahey was so gracious on this. This was when he was still alive. He noticed it. And why did he notice it? That the shed, he wasn't sure how close it was, but he knew it was close. And the reason he knew that is because he knew the trees were the lot line. Right. I never knew that. I see all these big pine trees around here. And so they actually had it surveyed, which made sense. We didn't feel the need to get it surveyed to put up a shed. Sure. We just we had the paperwork and we did that. But when he did that, it confirmed that it was on our property, but that easement or that setback was not quite right. And he was just such a gentleman about it. I mean, he was clear. He wanted to be clear on where things stood, but he said, I went over and I talked with him and I brought him the paperwork and I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I thought we were crossing every T and dotting every I. And I showed him all of that. And he said, yeah, I understand, but this was before the survey I think was done. He said, I'm pretty sure these drawings are not correct, because I'll tell you that Pine Tree is the corner of the property, and the other property marker is somewhere here on the bluff. And sure enough, when the surveyor came out, they put that stake.
Well, now they had the benefit of GPS.
Yes.
And they didn't at the time that this was all broken and surveyed. All right, there was the old method. Not that was bad, but it wasn't as accurate. Right. Working it off GPS and working it off the satellites.
Yeah.
So that footprint, okay, that's, I mean, that's why, you see the surveyors out there, and they got some guy standing way down 300, 400 yards down the road, and all he's got is a stick in his hand.
Right.
But that's his point.
That's right.
I mean, and the surveyor, all right, looks and it goes through, and then he makes his degrees and makes his turns, off of that, and he can
right.
tell it, all right, he punches in, 187 feet, 3.5 inches, boom.
It's
and then he sends that kid out there with that point, boom, and then he'll put a steel stake down. All right, well, that is a hell of a lot more accurate than it is when you got trees and you got bushes and you got,
my gosh, yeah,
you got rocks and you got things in your way.
It's like if you've ever been into like an old museum, say a Michigan Historical Museum, and you see a map of Michigan back, the map was made back in, hundreds of years ago, and it shows kind of the mitten of Michigan, but the edges are way different, but that was the technology at the time. Sure. Yeah, so just to wrap on that, it turns out that I since the builder or the contractor for our shed was taking the lines off of the location sure. of the cottage right. in the corners of the cottage, for that marker, it was just drawn wrong. The cottage was actually not represented correctly on the drawing as far as its location. So, but yeah, those things happen. It's hopefully, and I think fortunately for the most part, it hasn't been too much heartache or dramatic sure. stuff. But right. So you guys, being one of the original lots here, then you guys tell me about some of the early years. So now you've wrapped up the phone call with your dad, saying that you're getting this.
We would rent out our cottage all summer. Mom would take care of that. Pay the mortgage once, they keep 2 weeks aside for their vacation, and they do little projects.
Mom and Dad were still working and stuff
right.
like that.
So they would come up and do little projects.
It was tight for us, you know what I mean? As a carpenter, I wasn't working full 12 months a year at that
right.
time, you know what I mean? So
it was your line of work right out of the gate in the construction realm?
Yeah, right out of high school into an apprenticeship.
Yep.
And from there, I went and worked for a lot of different contractors and stuff. Yeah. Until I started my own business and stuff. Right. But the point is that back then, so through the 70s, all right, Tom and the partners, they set up, it was a very, very, simple loan. I think at the time, if my memory serves me, it was like 6% straight interest. Pay it once a year along with the taxes. Boom. That's when it comes. That was when in February you had to come up with the money and stuff. That for us, that was the worst time of the year because you're just paying off the Christmas bills, and then bingo, you got to come up with money for the house and the taxes up here.
Yeah. How long did we take it out on?
10 years.
Okay.
So it's a simple loan.
Yeah.
And Tom went to the bank, whoever they were dealing with up here.
It was great.
He said
it was
great.
just wonderful.
And I know that the other partners had they knew about it and stuff like it. But the point is that, they worked with everybody.
Yeah.
We weren't the only ones that had this happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were special treated.
Right.
In respect to, it was my dad's brother that was one of the partners. Yeah. And he offered it to us and stuff. But the fact of the matter is that I know that there was a number of the other folks that bought in after we did that were in the same kind of a situation. They couldn't come up with whatever it was.
So they also had the one bedroom apartment, pregnant with the first baby.
I don't know if that was the case.
Probably not.
Or you guys take the trophy on that one.
Bob talked to Tom. Bob Perotti talked to Tom and stuff like that. He was still working for him and stuff. He came up, he looked, he said, and he bought the land, bought the lot, he picked out the lot, whatever, and got what he,
sure.
But he didn't start building for a couple, 3 more years. He didn't start, right. I don't think Bob started building.
I don't know.
I think
I want to say 75.
What you were just talking about how, Tommy and the others, worked with anybody and so forth. I think that lays the foundation for what this
Community
community,
is all about.
yes, community is all
Absolutely.
about. You know, it's those early formative years that, you know, I wasn't privy to it, but I sense it. I mean, Emily and I sensed it as soon as we set foot up here, of like, wow, this place is special. The community, the vibe, the energy,
It's
the
a
connection.
family. It's
Right.
a family
Oh, for
orientated.
Yeah.
You know, it's about vacations. It's about experiencing. You know, the land. And another thing that you were not privy to is that when we first came up here, there were rolling dunes. There were, you know, you got down at the end of, you know, by Marion's house, you know, where before the first that's when the dunes got pulled away.
Right.
There was no stairs or anything. You just had a little bit, you know, and you'd go down into the rolling. You could leave
goodness,
it,
yes.
get down to the end of Toboggan Drive, and then you went into the dunes.
Sure.
And it was just rolling. There was 2 or 3 dunes,
Yeah.
and then we had another 60 or so yards of flat beach.
So this would have been prior to,
This
what
would have
was it,
been-
in the 80s was when that
No,
high water
right, the
came.
first- the first
high
time.
water. The second high water was just 2-3 years ago.
Right. The
Yeah.
first high water, it's about 35 years between them.
Yeah.
And the first one came, I want to say, in 85, 87, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
And that took out the dunes. Because Heaton owned that property that they condemned,
Yeah.
you know, all right? And that's when the puffers bought. After the state said, okay, it's inhabited, the waters receded,
Right.
receded. But they had to rebuild because they
Yeah,
lost the front.
Ron had
the front
to
end, the
pull
front-
that back.
That foundation, it was undermined and everything. Water was coming up.
Were they the
underneath.
worst hit there? I mean, you know, the water has a way of, you know, finding its own path and so
Well,
forth.
it works with the currents, and it works with the different storms.
So I know
because
that
it moves the sand and it moves the, you know.
there was the what do you call them? I want to say like ramparts that you can still see to
Right.
this day.
That's when
were put
that's
in
when
there.
the
But
Army
they're all
Corps of
down
Engineers
here.
came in
Right.
and they got that to hold the sand, the shifting sand that was moving down the lake like this.
Was
to hold
there? I mean, anything on this north end going on that was threatening these homes down here, or was it all kind of hitting down there?
Actually, it came in probably where the Dillons still, you know, had their place. Okay, and from that point on, it started to cut in. You know, the way the water.
So a little ways
because
further.
you have to remember the water rose.
Yeah.
It took away the dunes and it kept eating them.
Yeah.
You know, the storms, the waves, it hit them. It was just like you come up here in the wintertime and you see the ice flow, you know, and it goes out, you know, and at the end of it, it's maybe 8 feet to the water or 10 feet to the water.
Right.
But it's how that gets built up is when the water, when it's cold, the water hits that wall and it sprays.
Oh, yeah.
And it
Yeah.
freezes in the air and it drops down and it's just like piling up snow.
It will. I remember, say 3 years ago when we had the second incident of the high water that ended up taking out all the stairways and
Right,
stuff
exactly.
like that. Is at one point we were seeking to get like, well, what is the hard data on like how fast we're losing this? And I went down with a 100-foot tape measure and measured from a fixed point up on the road down to the front edge of that dune, because up until this point it had been, you know, weeks, if not months, of like anecdotal, hey, we're losing this much, what should we do? We're doing this, the board's, you know, working with things, what do we need to do? But we didn't know, were we losing 5 feet? Were we losing whatever? And I don't remember the span of time, but it was a relatively short span of time. I remember the figure. It was 41 feet that we had lost between the point that I took, the first data point, and the second data point. Let's just call that 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it was because, as you say, those waves would come in with that high water. You know, you'd look out there on a calm day and you'd say, well, what's the problem? Well, give it a good northwest blow, let those 3, 4, 5 footers come in, and they just kick out that bottom portion of that dune, and then it collapsed. And you could literally sit there and watch it.
Nothing was going to hold it.
Nothing was going to hold it. And we had 41 foot lost just like that. It was really cooking along. So fortunately, we're in that window of time where things have eased out. So you've had how many years total then, roughly, that you've been coming up to Mishago with family experiences and so forth now?
Since
I came up in '65. That was my first time up.
Okay.
And we bought in '69.
right,
So
but we've been up.
So you're
Mom and Dad and I, we were up in like say '62 or so, but you know we weren't out here. We didn't come out to the lake, but as a kid, I went to Wasabi Scout camps over by Big Blue and
so you had some experience up in this area.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Fruitvale and Russell Road that way, and then. You know,
now, was that a kind of a common thing? You know, I'm a Michigander.
A lot of the scout troops from Chicago
will
came to Wasapi. Okay, that was our scout camp. That was our area. Not that the other troops from like Michigan or other places would come. You know, and we got to meet a lot of other kids that were from other different areas.
Right.
You know, but I would say the vast majority of the scout troops that came to Wasapi were from Chicago.
Sure, okay.
Okay, and they owned a lot of property, they still do.
Yeah.
A lot of property over there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of history. There's a lot of things that, you know, we learned about, and as you know. So when this opened up, you know, this was like, wow.
Yeah, and you had some familiarity with this region. It wasn't like, you know, going to a place that you've never been to before, and you had an affinity for.
Well, it was a bonus too with Uncle Tom and Aunt Colette. You know?
Yeah,
it was so nice.
No question
to know
about that.
Michigan,
You know what I mean?
and Uncle Tom and Aunt Colette was like,
and their history, you know, with the girls coming up here, knowing about the, you know, when the Furmans owned the main, you know, the main house and the properties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, and when that came available, you know, boy, you know, that opened up things for, and I'm sure at that point, you know what I mean, that all three of those guys, you know what I mean, they were scratching their heads a little bit about what the hell did we get ourselves involved in.
I just love it. I mean, the whole adventure.
I mean, they all had
from
kids.
You guys doing your adventure to, let's not forget their adventure of pulling the trigger and doing
They all had families. They all had young children and stuff like that, and a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it wasn't like, you know, this was going to happen. You know what I mean? That these were three guys that just got out of college and stuff like that were making their young man's fortune, and they decided, like, well, I'm going to try and give this a shot.
Yeah.
They were pulling everybody down.
Sure.
You know? So, I mean, I have to think in my own mind that the three partners, they had some times that, you know, they had the sweat rolling down their back.
I'll bet.
You know, what did we do?
And our three kids and their families love it. Our grandkids love it. I mean, it's just...
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
well, what's not to love?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys still, as a family, you have some family gatherings here, the kids, the grandkids, and so forth.
Yep. One of our grandkids, when she was little, said, you know, Grammy, I want to just live up here. And I said, well, honey, but if you lived up here, then it wouldn't be extra special. And she was Morgan. And she, you know, she got it finally. You know,
but the thing
it's always special to come up.
The kids all love it, and as does my cousins, and their kids and their grandchildren and stuff like that. There's so much still to offer. You know, it's not like it's not like it's gotten old,
right?
Because it's constantly changing, and it's good. It's good to have growth. It's also good to keep the traditions and keep the part of what we know as a family orientated subdivision, if you will, if you want to go that modern. I never considered this a subdivision.
Right.
I always considered this, you know, these are my friends. These are people that grew up here, that, you know, it's just like the Dwyers, when the Dwyers came, you know, and you know, Marge and Jim Chapman, Tackman,
and the Headleys used to be
and the Headleys, and you know, and what I'm saying is the original group of people that bought in here and stuff like that had families, and this is what it was all about,
right?
And it still is.
Yeah.
The people that are buying in right now, that are buying properties that
Yeah.
families have given up or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the reason.
Yeah.
Okay, they're still coming, and what are they coming for? For their kids' experiences,
Yeah.
to grow up, to have a beach, to have a place that's private,
It's-
and enjoy. To
It's
enjoy
not
the
8
things,
hours away
and
or
that
12
it's
hours
Right.
away.
you know. And again, it's about how, as a group of families, as a group of people, we take care and we maintain
Yeah.
the integrity of what was originally figured.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that goes all the way back to the Furmans
Right.
when they owned all of this.
Right.
Isn't
Right.
that amazing when you think about
All
it?
right.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, this was, the only other building was the old farmhouse, the original farmhouse.
Quinn's.
That
That's
Quinn
where
Sutton
Quinn
owned.
is.
Yes.
And then
And on that property, they knocked it down. They had to. The foundation was too gone.
Right.
They couldn't bring
And
it
then
back.
the Nichols.
and then
house.
the Nichols and you, what I think is pretty special, you talk about Tommy, is that with Marie Nichols' home, who I had the good fortune of meeting,
Oh, she
just
was
She
so
was-
wonderful.
She was a doll.
Yeah, just a doll. She was well into her 90s, but when Emily and I got married and had our ceremony
Right,
here
right.
between Quinn's and the Parades, that's the Nichols
their
strip of
property.
land.
Sure.
It was.
And I didn't realize that at first. I was informed that it was. Well, of course, got to see, is it okay?
Sure.
Get the permission. And I spoke with her. I later spoke with one of their children too to make sure it was okay with them. But yeah, she was just the sweetest thing, and well into her 90s, and she was so sweet. And I learned more about the story of the Nichols. But then when she passed and the home was sitting, then to learn, I think I have the facts right, that Tommy and Pete.
Yeah.
So it's staying in the family in the Mashai.
They're redoing it, reworking
Yeah.
it.
So they have the two
Bring it
that
up,
are owning it,
Yeah.
and then also Muckna's is a Dwyer.
Yes.
That is
Isn't that
got
fun?
that.
Good.
Yes.
Mike bought John's.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So
it stays in, like John. I was talking to Mikey and stuff, and you got to remember, they're our kids' age.
right.
Okay, they grew up together.
Well,
They're a little bit older. What I'm saying is that but when we'd all be up here and stuff like that, this place was mobbed with kids.
Yeah.
Mobbed. You know what I mean? You think of just in the Dieschbourgs and the Nichols and the Chappets and stuff.
And the Dwyers, yeah, right.
Just those families.
Oh yeah.
Okay, there was a ton of kids.
Well, I
There
think
was
it
a
was
ton of teenagers. There was always.
John Chappett that said, I think only half kidding, says that this was his parents' way of basically keeping them out of trouble. Basically, let's give them a shovel, let's give them a hammer, let's
Keep them busy.
spend their summers building these cottages, these original Lindell cedar homes,
And they did.
Yeah.
And it was all part of what their what the original fellas and their wives thought about, as far as this would be a perfect place to raise the kids.
Yeah.
It'd be a perfect place to go for the summers.
Yeah.
And
know what I
sadly, you didn't ever meet Mr. Nichols.
I did
was
not.
wonderful. Oh
No.
my gosh, he
Bill
was
was a great guy.
just a
I feel
gem.
like I met him in a way because John Muckna has a lot of connection and fondness for him because
sure.
he had I don't know if it was a model airplane company. He had the Globe Company,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
for those that are listening to this, I can remember. In fact, they're probably still in the schools that you've got a globe, of the world globe that's
Right.
sitting in the classroom,
Exactly.
and chances are good that it was his company.
Repulog Globe.
What was it called?
Repulog Globe.
Repulog.
Repulog Globe.
Globe. Okay, so I mean, those are not probably easy things to make. You think about it; it seems
Oh my
simple,
gosh,
but
sure.
it's
Yeah.
a sphere. So he had that company, and then John Muckna, who is so into the model airplanes. In fact,
They used to fly out by the
he used to fly out here, and there was some connection with Mr. Nichols with model airplanes and so forth. So I think
That I
he
didn't
had.
know about.
So there was a connection there, and then again our wedding and so
for
forth.
sure.
So I wish I would have had a chance
yeah.
to meet him.
He
It sounds
was
like a
wonderful.
special man.
Yes, he
Oh,
sure
this is
was.
kind of neat that you're doing this, what you're doing, and stuff like that. Because down the road and stuff like that, there will come a time where these memories and these thoughts, if they're not recorded, if they're not put down, will evaporate.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, or they're just like any other story. You know, you tell me your story, and I tell your story to somebody else, and they go and tell 3 more people, and by the time you get back, you don't even recognize the story. Was I in that story? I didn't think I was in that story. You know?
True.
And especially if it comes from the Dieschbourgs, because we have a way of embellishing.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They make a good story better and longer.
Yeah, but you guys are fun. I'll tell you just a small, the listeners, a small anecdote. When I think it was last year, where we thought, well, let's go down and do a bonfire, and we'll bring some simple food down there. And this is Emily and I and the McFarlands, Dave and Sue, are our best friends and so forth. We thought you did,
yes,
but you guys were like the partiers. Emily and Sue were already back up; they were gone.
We came in late because we had gone out to dinner.
That's just. I was so thrilled to see you guys coming down the stairs. I don't know what time it was. I know it was perfectly dark because it was just Dave and I.
It was just sunset when I came down the stairs.
We just, we got these hot, glowing ember coals, and I hear something. I look up at the stairways, and here comes Rick and Georgie, with their chairs coming down, and we had a ball, and I just loved sitting around, just listening to your guys' story and your energies and so forth, and you guys are both a ball of energy. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, you've had a lot of years here and a lot of memories. As far as this region, do you like to stay like right when you're up here, you're at the cottage, or is there any fun things that you go to, ice cream or restaurants?
He's a Dieschbourg ice cream, of course, that comes from Uncle Tom, but we like to go up to Petoskey and Harbor Springs, and
we have one of the guys that I grew up with across the street became a priest. And he was the pastor up at Harbor Springs at the beautiful little white church at the end of the street.
That's a beautiful
for seven years he was up there.
Wow!
And he worked on the big addition that they put on there, and then he left, and he just celebrated 2 years ago. He just celebrated 50 years in the priesthood. So the point is that when you come up here, there's so many things that you want to see, and there's so many beautiful. You go up to the
Tunnel of the Trees. We have friends that own Legs Inn.
Right.
They're from Mount Prospect.
Yes.
Where we're from.
They lived. Their kids went to school
Legs
together.
Inn.
Played soccer and football together.
Right.
Yeah.
So lots of
lots
of fun places and things to do.
There's a lot of history what goes back and forth.
But how long of a drive is it to? It's a decent drive from here to Harbor Springs.
4 hours will cover you real easy.
Yeah,
with
it's a beautiful drive.
With a couple of stops and stuff like that. But you can make it in a little over. If you're moving, you can do it in about 3.5 hours. So.
Yeah. And then I know, of course, you're a big golfer, Rick. I've done some golfing with you. So
there's a lot of nice courses.
There is.
And a little farther north, there's some beautiful properties and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And like I say, it's like, we never looked at buying any other properties and stuff like that. Or, at one time when I was still working and stuff like that, I was thinking about, buying some land, maybe put up a couple of pole barns. Because at that time, it was starting to get very evident that all of us had toys. Mm-hmm. All of us we had boats, and we had sailboats, and we had ATVs, and we had motorcycles, and we had all kinds of things. And it was like, we got to start figuring out where we're going to put all this stuff. You know what I mean? Because I'm not dragging this back and forth. So and that's when
built a garage.
Yes, you did.
We were talking about possibly buying some property and putting a couple of pool barns up and stuff like that. And so it's just it never came. But once we were able to build over on this side, on the north side, without infringing on our rights or anybody else's rights.
Yeah.
Then that worked out.
Yeah, you just Georgie, you
but
just
that was
mentioned
a long
you just
time coming,
put a beautiful garage in, and I'll tell the story that you almost had to build a whole new place because you were talking about this picture back in the 60s and how ultimately that was tore down except for the foundation.
Right.
We built from there.
In 2001.
In 2001. And then, but before you did the garage, which was basically last year-ish, maybe a year before, okay.
22.
Yeah.
But
And this.
Yeah.
we were,
Kitchen.
Emily and I were awakened on a very stormy night by a light up of the sky immediately by the crack of thunder.
Yeah.
And we were both upright, and I said, and we're only right down Sunset, I said, Emily, I said, I don't know where it hit, but I know that struck right here in Mishago.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of went to the window, and I'm looking out, and I don't see anything flickering or anything, and just starting to get a little bit relaxed, and all of a sudden I see the gumballs, lighting up the night sky of the emergency vehicles coming in. So it was still raining cats and dogs, big storm, and I threw on some rain gear and went down. Quinn was out. I mean, it was... The night was dark, until it lit up. It was
until the lightning would light it up, and it was still pouring like
it was still pouring. And I see, gosh, there must have been 3-4 emergency vehicles here.
Seven vehicles.
Was it 7
by the
total?
time they were all done coming,
and they came in like the cavalry. I mean, granted, had it not been for you guys being here and your quick thinking, this would have been ashes.
Yes, exactly.
Because what was, I don't even know that I know actually the full story. It struck not your home, but it struck the ground or a tree.
It didn't hit the house.
We thought
it might have. It might have hit the roof. Right. We didn't know. But the fire alarms or the smoke detectors went off probably about a minute after that lightning hit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, I said, oh my God. I said, so, I got, a pair of breeches on and stuff like that. And I came downstairs and I
that's
said,
when I called 911, of course.
Yeah, she called the fire department right away. Thank God the phones went through. Well, it was. Because True Stream, it just tied us in.
Right.
It literally just tied us in. So, I came down the stairs. Our room was upstairs, and I came down the stairs, and I came running through here. I got the big fire extinguisher that was in this closet right here, and I grabbed that. And as I turned around to come back, the firebox, I could see flames coming out of the firebox in the corner underneath the stairs. Yeah. And I said, "Uh-oh." So I went over there and I looked and I saw it was coming from the inside corner, right underneath the stairs, right into that corner. So I hit that with the fire extinguisher, knocked that down and stuff. And then I went into the bedroom, the closet behind that. But I had to get into the access panel.
Right.
Okay, so I had to get through the closet.
I was afraid that was on.
Because I was afraid that it was going into that dead space underneath the stairs. Everything was good there. I knocked, but I did hit it again and stuff. Then I figured, oh my God, maybe it's down in the basement and it's spreading. I can't see it, but it's
But by that time, the fire.
No, not quite. Because then I went downstairs. When I ran around outside, and I slipped and fell in the grass because it was pouring.
Oh yeah.
I had no shoes on. I guess I was barefooted.
Sure.
I went down. I opened up the shed. Opened up the biblical doors and went down into the basement there. Thank God everything was good there. There was no fire. There was no smoke. I mean, there was nothing. So I came back up and I ran around the house this way.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is before the addition is on. We were planning the addition at that point. I came in the back door here on the north side, and when I walked in or ran in the back door, there was fire on the wall.
In the laundry
flickering behind the washer and dryer.
Oh my gosh!
We got in the corner. So that was I knocked that down. Now what they determined is that it probably hit the ground or hit the roots of the trees.
Okay.
And the lightning, like the fire captain said, so you would never be able to understand lightning or the way electricity runs with that much voltage. It'll follow whatever it will. All right, just like water will always find its own level.
Right.
All right, and it apparently ran, in. It didn't hurt any of the pipes. It didn't hurt it. I had everything is grounded here, But what it did is it picked up the gas lines, all right, the flex gas lines to the fireplace and to the dryer.
Okay.
And it where they touched across another piece of metal, they arced.
Okay.
And that's what started trouble.
Wow.
And like never would have thought that, you know what I mean? It was all, you know what I mean? So we were all protected and everything like that, but that's what happened. And that's, thank God, you know, because there was already the 2x4s behind the prefab fireplace there. They were already starting to char.
Jeez.
You know? Thank God I used fire treated 2x and stuff.
True.
Like when I did that.
True.
So,
and thank God that you guys were both here and
we
you were
were
quick
here.
action.
My buddy Jack Schultz, who was he was a retired fire chief at that point. But I've known Jack because he married one of my gals from Chicago that I knew, since I've been 14 years old. Okay. Yeah. And he married her, and she's, you know, they live in town and stuff like that. Jack and his dad were both fire captains, since both retired. But Jack used to tell me all the time, if you ever have a fire and your house is involved,
and you're not
he said,
there,
we'll be there in time to put out the foundation.
Yes.
Because he said there's no water here.
Yeah. It was
Right.
like, oh.
And even though we just put in a new, you know, but that's in order to get water from there.
Right.
They got to put it in a truck. They're not going to run 300 or 400 feet of hose. They don't have that.
Right.
So what happens is that they bring that 5,000 gallon tanker, which is sitting in their firehouse, you know, in Montague, but they only fill it up about a third of the way. Otherwise, they'd flatten the tires. You can't hold that much water.
Sure.
Sitting on one vehicle, it won't do. So they have their 6-inch line is already connected to that truck. So if they have a house fire or that kind of a fire, the first guy in throws that valve and he's got that thing filling up.
Yeah.
Okay. But it takes about 15 to 25 minutes to fill that truck up, and then he said that thing don't go 70 miles an hour.
No, yeah, they're not exactly whipping around the corners of Webster.
He said by the time that they can lumber up, they would need that water.
Yeah.
All right.
They could be a solid from Montague. It'd be a good half hour. Best case scenario, maybe 45 minutes. They
got here in 22 minutes.
Is that what it was? Yes, I know that I was so surprised how quickly they were here.
I was super surprised. I was so happy to see that captain walk through the door. He was the biggest guy I've ever seen in my whole life. He was bigger than my Uncle Tom. And,
I think I remember him. He was
he had with his fire hat on and his big heavy fire jacket and stuff like that. When he walked through the back door, he had to take his helmet off, and bend his head to the side in order to get in the door.
Wow!
All right.
Yeah. And then I remember they were going through doing all their routine tests, of the scanning the walls to see if there's any.
They were very
sure.
They sent one of the firemen downstairs in a crawl and had them crawl all the way down to make sure that nothing else was, that there was nothing else that we didn't see or that,
As I said,
that all the electric worked.
To stay tonight, and they said yes.
Not that you probably could sleep a week after that.
No.
That was probably didn't hardly even need your cup of coffee after that. That where you're probably pretty wired. Well, you probably would be rebuilt by now if that ever did happen. But thank goodness it didn't. It was a dramatic evening, and due to your quick actions and calling 911,
we were very lucky.
You were here. So
because had we not been here, it would have. Definitely, we would have lost the house.
Wow.
So, and that's something to know for everybody. My son Matt, who builds, at that time was building log homes up in Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin. He said that none of those states even allow that flex metal anymore, even though it's coated.
Yeah.
He says everything has gone to plastic.
Yeah.
So, he says it's all high pressure plastic.
Isn't that what you put in there?
Yeah. So it's not something that you don't know, but that because I didn't even know it was available.
Right. Yeah.
I said never gave that a thought. I mean, it's coated. It's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Since we made sure that nothing was touching nothing.
Yeah.
Really.
It was all
Not that you want another lightning strike, but if it does, you're a little bit better prepared.
Although I get a little nervous when it starts even though it's pretty.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You've got to see some dramatic storms coming across here.
You can't beat it.
Oh my gosh!
Now with a 10-foot pole,
it is.
You can't
so
beat it when
beautiful.
you're seeing that lightning coming across the lake.
It is dramatic, isn't it?
Boy,
When you get one of those big fronts that's just coming across,
Yeah.
and it is beautiful, but beautiful in kind of a threatening, scary way for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, guys, this has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you,
I
Eric, for
appreciate
doing this,
your guys' time, and I certainly learned more about your story, and that will do a wrap on this episode of Voices of Mishago. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.